Marathon. It's a long-distance foot race with a distance of 26 miles and 3/10 of a yard. It has quickly become one of the most prestigious of all events. Its origins go all the way back to some of the Greek Punic Wars, from the legend of Philippides, the Greek messenger that legend states while he was taking part in the Battle of Marathon, which took place sometime in the fall of 490 BC. He witnessed a Persian vessel changing its course towards Athens, and he feared that they were going to go raid as revenge for the Greeks having defeated them that day. So he ran the entire 26.3 miles to Athens to warn them. He did not discard his armor or anything. He ran the entire thing full blast and covered an hour, covering the distance in a record time in under 3 hours, and basically told them, do not believe the Persians, we have won, steady yourselves, and then he collapsed and died. In our modern age, the marathon has become one of the most prestigious athletic events for elite athletes and just everyday athletes that want to see how well they can do. They take place all over the world, and many of them have risen to prestige. Not much, but not many have ever surpassed the legendary Boston Marathon. It has become one of the most prestigious events in the running world and is one that you have to qualify to even apply for, whereas a lot of the other large events you are able to apply for, and if you're early enough, you'll get in. But the Boston Marathon, you have to complete one of the other major marathons, such as Chicago, such as Nashville, such as New York, to even qualify for the lottery to get into the Boston Marathon. And Tracy, why are you talking about the Boston Marathon? Well, I'm going to talk about one of the most shocking sports scandals and swindles to ever take place in the history of sporting. In 1980, the iconic Boston Marathon became the center of this scandal that shocked the entire world. I have for you the story of Rosie Ruiz and her infamous attempt to cheat her way to victory in the Boston Marathon. The Boston Marathon, it was a crisp April morning in 1980 when thousands of runners gathered at the starting line in Hopkinton, Massachusetts, ready to tackle the 84th Boston Marathon. Among them was a petite, unknown runner named Rosie Ruiz. Rosie's mysterious victory came quickly, in the blink of an eye. She crossed the finish line with a remarkable time of 2 hours, 31 minutes, and 56 seconds. Now, a sub-3 hour marathon time is, especially for a female, is men's time, and it is world record level men's time. And she set a new women's course record, or so she thought. Her sudden and surprising victory raised immediate suspicion among race officials and fellow runners, mainly due to two world-class champion women's runners that had already won numerous qualifying marathons to be there. But who is Ruiz? Ruiz was born in Havana, Cuba around 1954-1955 and moved with her family at the age of 8 to Memphis, Florida. After immigrating to the United States, Ruiz was separated from her mother and lived with aunts, uncles, and cousins in Hollywood, Florida. In 1972, she graduated from South Broward High School and then attended Wayne State College in Nebraska, obtaining a degree in music in 1977. She then moved to New York City, where she found work with a metal traders and commodities broker. And then in 1979, she applied to the New York City Marathon and was actually accepted. Her application to the New York City Marathon was steeped in scandal as well, as she originally missed the cutoff date, but then she received a special dispensation from the creators of the race due to her claim that she had been dying of brain cancer, and that's why she wanted to run it as a new lease on life, so she was allowed to enter the race, which is a qualifying event for the Boston Marathon. She ran 10 miles of the course that day. However, hitting a wall at that point, she decided she would go for a little bit of trickery and actually ended up taking a subway from the quarter point all the way to the finishing point in Central Park. That day on the subway, she met Susan Morrow, who was a freelance photographer on her way to photograph the winners as they came in. Ruiz told Morrow that she is an injured runner who dropped out but was wanting to see the finish and support the other runners. Once there, Morrow went on to the finish line to photograph the first runners as they came across the finish line, and Ruiz herself wandered into the park, limping, and found a volunteer. She told them she had finished but was injured, and as a result, she was awarded a finishing time in the New York City Marathon of 2 hours and 55 minutes, qualifying her for Boston. Tracy, how could they qualify her without confirming that time? Well, this is 1979. This is way before we have the digital trackers and the real-time viewing, a video camera on every runner. It was sporadic. Television crews did not set up the entire course as they have come to do in past New York City and Boston marathons. So it was very easy to blend in with the crowd, and a lot of it was still manual timekeeping. This would probably never happen today with there being pacers at every checkpoint, every aid station, and most importantly, apps where you can literally track a runner because they're wearing on their race bib a digital GPS that tracks their entire pace. So this would not happen today, but in 1979, this could very well happen. Her boss at the commodities brokerage was also an avid runner, and he was so proud of her that he offered to pay her way to Boston if she took part in the marathon, so she agreed to do it. She did try to legitimately train, but in just the few months that she had, she knew it was futile. She really realized that even finishing the race was going to be hard. Most marathons set a time limit of around 6 hours for the full marathon. However, she, because of her performance at New York, and I use performance with quotes, she would have to do a sub 3 hour run. So this is, like I said, the top tier of athletes in general, and especially women athletes. So she didn't just have to finish, but she had to do another record-breaking type of run. So she knew that it was going to be virtually impossible for her to even finish the race, much less put in the kind of time. So back to the 1980 marathon, where she crossed the finish line as the first woman with a time blowing her original New York City marathon time out of the water, shaving about 25 minutes off of it. So almost immediately after her victory, doubts began to resurface. Ruiz's time seemed to be almost too good to be true. Questions were raised about her unremarkable training history, how no one knew who she was, and how she seemed not very sweaty or tired or halfway bonked like most runners are when they come in. So the investigation began. Marathon officials reviewed video footage and interviewed spectators and fellow runners. Bill Rogers, who won the men's division that day, noticed that Ruiz could not recall many things that most runners know by heart, such as her intervals and split times. This is when you finish the 5K portion of it, the first 3.25 miles. Then when you finish the 10K, the 6.5 miles. When you finish the halfway marathon, 13.1. Most runners will know their pace and their interval times at those sections.
Let me pose this to both of you. Rosie, there are those that say that your improvement in time is impossible. Now, Bill, have you heard before
from the New York Marathon, right? Is that
yes, the improvement from the first marathon you ran, right? Yeah. Thank you, Michael. But does that happen in a marathon where you're pushing so hard it's like you do the impossible?
Well, I can tell you, I had a 10-minute improvement when I went from 2:19 to 2:09 in 75, and everybody was shocked, and they said an unknown and everything. But I think it would be very tough to go from 2:56 to 2:31, and I don't know. I think Rosie will have to resolve this for herself, you know. But I think for myself, I can't conceive of it.
She did not know that. Others noticed, in addition to her not panting or being coated in sweat, that her thighs were kind of chubby and not lean and muscular like the most top-rated athletes in this type of distance running would be. She later released stress test results that they did on her, showing that her resting heart rate was 76. Now, even though she was skinny, a resting heart rate of 76 is not very athletic. Remember, when I started my weight loss journey at 360 pounds, I had a resting heart rate of in the 80s. So that is not too far behind her. I have a resting heart rate now that goes between 65 and 69, and I still weigh over 200 pounds. So a resting heart rate of 76 is not very good, especially for a world-class runner where their resting heart rate would be somewhere between 40 and 50. In addition, her time of 2 hours, 31 minutes, and 56 seconds was a huge improvement, like I said, of 25 minutes over her reported time in the New York City Marathon just 6 months earlier. And then Catherine Switzer, a local sports reporter in Boston who herself had finished the Boston Marathon in a sub 3-hour time a few years before, commented and asked herself, so you improved from 2 hours and 56 minutes to 2 hours and 31 minutes. And she asked who she trained with and what her interval times were, and Ruiz basically said, I trained myself, without explaining further.
Winner in the Boston Marathon today with a time of 2:31 and change. Now, we don't know how many seconds that is. It may be a new American record. What was the time in your first ever marathon, and where was it?
It was 2 hours and 56 minutes and 33 seconds in New York last year.
And so you improved from 2 hours and 56 minutes to 2 hours and 31 minutes.
I guess so.
What do you attribute that improvement in time to?
I don't know.
Have you been doing a lot of heavy intervals?
Someone else asked me that. I'm not sure what intervals are. What are they?
Well, intervals are track workouts that are designed to make your speed improve dramatically. And if you went from a 2:56 to 2:31, one would normally expect that you do a lot of speed work. Is someone coaching you or advising you?
No, I advise myself.
Well, it was a fantastic performance, Rosie. Congratulations. Rosie Ruiz, the mystery woman winner. We missed her at all our checkpoints. She came through the finish in a fantastic 2:31. We have to confirm that time at this point, but she was way ahead of a world-class field here today in the Boston Marathon.
As the investigation continued, 2 Harvard students, John Faulkner and Sola Mahoney, had traveled that day to witness the last mile of the marathon. And from their vantage point, they thought they saw someone resembling Ruiz in her yellow t-shirt and short hair bursting out of the crowd somewhere around Commonwealth Avenue, about a half mile from the finish.
I just saw someone stumble out of the crowd in front of me across the street. This was on Commonwealth Ave, probably about a half mile from the finish. She was in track clothes and wearing a number, but I thought someone had just sort of stumbled into the race. Maybe somebody was a little crazy or something.
And then trotting to the finish line. Based on all of this speculation, the marathon officials launched an official investigation and could not find any sign of Ruiz at any point on the race. So she didn't even attempt the race. She started it, probably ran a couple of miles, and then bolted into the crowd and cut across the entire course, blending in with the crowd, probably removing her bib and everything else until she got to that finishing point where she could bust out and still have a sub 3-hour finish, because her boss and everybody in New York thought it was so awesome that she had placed in the top women's runners. And so a few days later, based on all of this and other evidence, the Games Committee of New York also retroactively began to investigate her New York City Marathon qualifying race. And at that point, Susan Morrow came forward this was the epitome of a viral story in the early 80s. It was on every television network, every sports show, every radio commentator was talking about it. Susan Morrow, remember the reporter that she had met on the subway after only doing 10 miles of the New York City Marathon, came forward to tell the New York Times that she had seen her on a subway and told her she was injured and that she did not finish the race. And then after investigating timestamps, all the video footage they had of the New York City Marathon that day, New York City retroactively disqualified her from the New York City Marathon, voided her time, and then as a result, Boston was able to void her victory and her participation at all in the Boston Marathon, because at that point she would not have qualified for it to begin with. The scandal sent shockwaves to the running community and all media. Her victory, like I said, was given to 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗃 of Canada, who was the rightful winner, coming in just a couple of minutes after her. And she faced a lot of public humiliation. She was stripped of her title of women's champion of the Boston Marathon, but she would not return the medal. She did keep her gold medal until she died. It was in her possessions when she died in 2019, and she always maintained her innocence. After the Boston Marathon, after her return to New York, she was summarily fired from her, after all the publicity, she was fired from her job, and she started working in some odd jobs, and then eventually started working as a secretary for a real estate company, where in 1982 she was arrested and convicted of embezzling $60,000 in 1982, which would be the equivalent of almost $200,000 today. And she spent 1 week in jail and had 5 years probation. She then moved back to South Florida to be with her family, where she was arrested in 1983 for her involvement in a cocaine deal that was hoping to net about $50,000. For this, she was sentenced to 3 years probation. In January of 1984, she married 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗃. They had 3 children, but they divorced in 1986. She kept her married name, though, so that she could kind of blend in with the crowd and lose the persona of the great Boston Marathon cheater. And in 1993, her last known job, she was working as a client service representative for a medical laboratory company in Florida. One of her friends, or more of an acquaintance really, a man by Steve Merrick, who had defended her in the Boston Marathon scandal for months, did say that she admitted to him, and this was after her death in 2019, that she had cheated. She said she just jumped out of the crowd in an effort to finish below 3 hours so that her boss would be happy, but then she had no idea that she had come in first. She would never have wanted to come in first because of all the publicity, and you can see where that gave her. So whatever you believe, it was kind of a tragic event. It did ruin her life. Now, who's to say that she would have been a criminal if that had never happened? If she had just come in under 3 hours as a regular old finisher in the Boston Marathon, I'm going to say she probably wouldn't have turned to other crimes. I think that was kind of a way to buy her way out of publicity, maybe a little bit, but the argument could also be made she had a steady job. Why would she embezzle if she didn't have criminality running through her veins? So the debate goes on. Let me know down below what you think. But whatever you think, Ruiz's actions damaged not only her own reputation, but the reputation of the Boston Marathon. It highlighted the importance of race officials and spectators in maintaining integrity. And her name will be forever associated with cheating. And since this cheating scandal, things like digital trackers, checkpoints, constant photography have been implemented to make sure that this never happens again. But her cheating in the Boston Marathon will go down as one of the most infamous events in the history of professional sport. Thank you for joining me, and I wish you all a great weekend, and I will see you soon. Until next time, keep doing crime.